And welcome back to the Law News Network. That was testimony yesterday from a lead FBI agent in the Holly Bobo case. I'm joined now by Paul Stanley. He's on the phone with us, driving in the car. He's a journalist down there in Tennessee, and he has been following this case very, very closely. Paul, you saw everything yesterday in terms of the case that the defense was putting on. And what really stood out to you, as you were just telling me, was this testimony from a former agent from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigations, Terry Dicus. Did you feel that he was being honest on the stand, first and foremost?
You know, Amy, it didn't strike me that he was being dishonest. I think Terry Dicus, what struck me in his testimony is at one point he said, you know, if there was one issue in this case that made me discount a particular suspect, I just put them to the side and moved on. And we know there are many facets to an investigation. I think yesterday Terry Dicus was trying to save his own skin. I think he was trying to lay this on Terry Britt and say that he thought Terry Britt did it, and trying to cover his own rear end from the standpoint that he dropped the ball in the Adams investigation. He is now a criminal attorney in Savannah, Tennessee, which is where the trial is being held, and I think both his as a defense witness and the cross came off very poorly.
Right, and so why do you say that he messed up this case? Do you know anything that definitively that he made a mistake in investigating this? Do you know why he was removed or resigned? It's a little bit unclear at this point.
Yes, as far as his resignation, I know he was pulled off the case. My understanding is he was put back on it and then resigned to go to law school. I do not know specifics at this point in time of how he bungled it. I haven't heard anyone from the prosecution or law enforcement talk about that. But I think that the fact that he so quickly discounted the Adams brothers and Jason Autry and Shane Austin and moved on, and also did not confirm their alibis. I think that was pointed out in earlier testimony. And I think that, you know, why didn't they wiretap the Adams? You know, why just Terry Britt? I understand Mr. Britt's record and why you would investigate him, but I think they had too much tunnel vision on Terry Britt and didn't look all around them at the other possibilities of Holly's murder.
Yeah, but Paul, based on what you know and your expertise, I mean, you've been following this case for a while, is it possible that Terry Britt did this, that Terry Britt should have been charged rather than Zach Adams, as this investigator is saying? Obviously, I want to put the caveat in there that Terry Britt has not been charged. But is it possible that the defense could have gone with this theory that, hey, you guys got the wrong guy?
Amy, yes, he could. You and I both know that it is a possibility that Mr. Britt could have been involved in this. But if he was involved in this, if he were the perpetrator and is guilty of this crime, then the TBI has done an even further injustice to themselves by not finding the evidence to charge someone like a Terry Britt. So I think that would turn out to be a worst-case scenario for the investigators and law enforcement.
But what about some of the things that Terry Dicus was saying on the stand yesterday? Did you find it convincing that he said that Terry Britt's alibi didn't match up, that there was a ping from a cell tower that may have placed him around the area where the crime happened? Was any of that convincing to you?
It wasn't convincing to me because although Mr. Dicus was not a cell phone expert, and we've heard from people who have expertise in that area, the first thing that crossed my mind, especially when it came to Holly's phone, is Holly's phone, once she was abducted, just because her phone pinged in an area did not mean she was with it. Just because Zach Adams' phone pinged in an area did not mean it was on his person. So we have to look at the evidence from that angle, too. I don't think Mr. Dicus is a bad individual. I think he bungled the investigation. Again, I think he was trying to cover for himself because it would look bad on him. If Zach Adams is convicted, it's not going to be good for Terry Dicus from a standpoint of his investigative ability.
It's an interesting point that you bring up about how the cell pings really aren't that reliable. And that's been shown time and time again. A lot of times this evidence is brought in to even get an indictment, and then it's not even brought in at the trial because there are experts that can come in and say, these cell pings or GPS, a lot of this stuff, it just isn't reliable. There's too many problems with it. It hasn't been honed to the extent that it should be admissible in court. But if you're going to say that Terry Dykes' information about cell pings aren't reliable to pin Terry Britt to this crime, then also on the flip side, doesn't it go against the prosecution's evidence that there were pings from Zach Adams?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Amy. It could go both ways. Now, we all have to keep in mind, and we have to remind our viewers and listeners, that the crime occurred in 2011. Holly's body was, our summary remains were found in 2014, and here we are in 17. Cell technology has advanced since then. I know from personal experience, I was involved in something where the TBI investigated someone who perpetrated a crime against me in 2009, and they obtained all the text messages from the suspects in that case. Now, the difference was they were able to physically possess the phones that they had and were able to get those text messages. My understanding is you can get data and text messages from phones or from numbers for a specific period of time, but after that they are data mined and they aren't available. I would have loved to have seen the text messages, if there were any, between Jason Autry and Zach Adams on the morning of the murder.
Yeah, that's a fascinating point. That there really, though, with this whole case, there's just a lot of evidence that we are missing. We don't know if
so
there's
much,
a tape
Amy, as someone who has a law degree, there's so much that cannot be introduced into evidence that we would all like to hear. Shane Austin's testimony and confession, for example, he was the one who was charged and committed suicide. No one can rebut him, so we can't bring that up. Natalie Bobo, the cousin of Holly, who was the stripper, what some people say is a prostitute, who mentioned to Zach Adams that she was going to bring Holly in for a three-way encounter. Would love to hear from her. And, of course, there's Dylan Adams, whose IQ is probably to the level that he may not benefit either side, if you recall.
Yeah, and you were also telling me that you believe that the Tennessee Bureau of Investigations bungled the whole investigation of the case, the whole processing of the scene. Can you give me specifics on information that you have with respect to that?
Well, I don't have all of the concrete specifics I would like to have. This is more of a gut feel, and I have a high degree of respect for the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. Mark Flynn is the director. They do a phenomenal job. But I think from the moment the crime was reported, within an hour, you had 100 people or so on the Bobo residence just trampling all over the place. It wasn't secured. When you moved into where the TBI got involved hours later, I just think that they found themselves running down paths that may not have been the most advantageous at the time. Again, if Terry Britt, or if someone like Terry Britt, abducted her and murdered Holly Bobo, and we are not trying them at this very day, then that's an even greater bungle of TBI investigative ability and local law enforcement. But I know they were trying their best.
Well, Terry Dykes had mentioned that he wiretapped Britt. What became of that? Will we hear that recording?
Yes, you're exactly right. He did wiretap Britt. First thing I thought is, why didn't he wiretap other people? And in the testimony that we heard yesterday, it made me suspicious of Terry Britt, because I believe Mr. Dykes testified that when Mr. Britt thought he was being wiretapped, he was discussing with his wife the alibi. You remember Mr. Britt's alibi was, I was with my wife, we went to buy a bathtub. And here's the receipt. Now, they were going back and forth, and him being at certain stores could not be verified sometimes. But again, if they wiretapped Mr. Britt and couldn't find the evidence they needed, could they have been able to do that if they would have directed those efforts elsewhere?
Yeah, but do you think that that should be admissible because it's something that's mentioned in the testimony?
That's a great point. I don't have an answer for that, but that is something that we would like to know. I was surprised that the prosecution rested so early and didn't come out with a bigger bang after Jason Autry's testimony. And it looks like there's a possibility that the defense could rest today. So this could go to the jury as early as this afternoon, maybe tomorrow after argument, and we could have a verdict within hours or a couple of days.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it seems that There's almost some sort of like a role reversal here where the prosecution's witnesses are primarily people with criminal records and their credibility is just automatically off the bat in question. On the flip side, the defense has all these law enforcement people that you would think would be more credible than the prosecution's witnesses. What do you make of that?
You know, that is a phenomenal point, Amy. I was thinking yesterday that the defense witnesses, the Terry Dykuses, the other agents that were involved that are defense witnesses, the first thing that crossed my mind is why weren't they prosecution witnesses? Those are the people the prosecution normally has to call, and I find it, you know, as a non-attorney and just a legal observer, interesting that the defense is calling the lead investigator as a witness.
Yeah. And so, I mean, these people who the prosecution basically ended their case, you said they didn't really go out with a bang. I mean, they've got people with criminal records. They've got, like, the jailhouse snitch types, people that say that Zach Adams was trying to get messages to his brother Dylan in prison to basically say, if you say anything, you're going to end up the same place that Holly Bobo did. Were any of those people convincing to you?
I did find some of the inmates, the people with, or not the inmates, but the gentlemen that had prior criminal convictions, I did find some of their testimony to be very intriguing and believable. Jay Johnson, a local attorney in the area from Henderson, Tennessee, I think had one of the most incredible quotes that he put out there, and that is this: criminals can tell the truth, good people can lie. It's up to the jury to discern the two and how they involve this case.
And that's the truth, right, Paul?
I think a criminal can be on that stand and be telling the absolute truth.
Yeah.
I think a good person could get up there and maybe give us misleading information or give investigators misleading information. I certainly hope they don't do that on the stand. But the jury is going to have an interesting case in front of them because, Amy, what is reasonable doubt to them in this case to have them reach a decision one way or the other? And you know, you got to hit a perfect 12 out of 12. You can't hit 11 out of 12.
Right. But what about the character who has a horse in the race, and that's Jason Autry? He is somebody who I had a hard time reconciling whether I believe him or not. I had a guest here the other day who said that his testimony at some points felt very raw and authentic to him, like the way he would talk naturally. At other points, his descriptions were so detailed that it almost felt rehearsed and cinematic. Did you get that type of an impression from him?
I'm sorry. Repeat that question.
Did you get that impression from him that sometimes it was like, whoa, this sounds a little bit like a movie, and then other times it felt like, okay, this is a guy who doesn't seem that intelligent, doesn't seem that compassionate, and he's giving up details that are incriminating to him, so maybe it is authentic.
Well, first of all, when they were asking Jason Autry about what's he getting out of this and immunity, and he said, look, yeah, I'm hoping to get a light sentence. And the reality is everyone's trying to get off here. Zach Adams is trying to get off here, and everyone involved. I did find a large part of his testimony very believable. And I also believe Jason Autry is a very smart individual. I think he has a high IQ. I think he is not only very worldly, but I think he's not, as well spoken as we can see, but he understands what is going on here. But by and large, I thought his testimony was convincing and outweighed any detractions I found it.
But Paul, what about these details about the shots going off, boom, 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 and the birds flying into the air? And he's admittedly saying that he had taken a big dosage of drugs, that he was either on meth or heroin, something. So if you're that high, how can you remember all of these little details about everything that happened in that moment?
My understanding is people that are under the are high on meth, cocaine, any kind of amphetamine or upper as these drugs are, can still remember details. What was interesting, being from this part of the country, it is not uncommon for us to hear gunshots out in the woods. At any time of the year, we don't think a lot of that. When he talked about the birds flying after that, I mean, he was painting a picture as if he were there. Now, could he be making all this up? Absolutely. and he knows enough about the environment and what would happen to paint that picture. But I thought it was interesting. He said when the shot was fired, he sobered up. He came to his senses, I think were his exact words. And this is a part of the country that's, Savannah, Tennessee is close to Decatur County, but this is not where the crime took place. And this is a very peaceful, quaint community and region that we live in. But what we're talking about in Decatur County is a group of probably 200 to 300 people, and I'm going to call a clan, who are involved in these type of activities that the Jason Autry, the Adams boys were. It's a very closed group, and it's unfortunate we're having to peel back the layers and expose all of that, but it's also very unfortunate that, the Bobo family has had to go through this, and Holly's lost her life.
Oh, yeah, it's absolutely devastating. And I want to repeat, because I've brought this up over and over again, how disgusted I was with the way that Jason Autry talked about Holly Bobo. After all of this has happened, with her family there in the courtroom, and he's on the stand, you'd think he would have an ounce of compassion for her or the family, but it really didn't seem like he cared. And in fact, he said on the stand that he didn't care about the body. They said, you didn't really care about this girl in the body, did you? Flat out, he said no.
He calls Jason, or he calls Zach that morning and goes, hey, I need to get high. Can you give me some drugs? And he goes, hey, meet me over here. I've got something I need you to do. He goes over there and says, what is it? He thought it was someone else, but he goes, that's Holly Bobo's body in there. I mean, is that not shock? I mean, I don't care what you're doing, what your lifestyle is. Are you not shocked? And why didn't he look under that blanket? I guess if I was going to help somebody bury a body, I'd want to see the body. I'd want to know what I was doing.
Yeah, it seemed like all he really cared about was when he thought
getting
that
drugs.
She was alive, getting drugs, and when he thought that she was alive, that she heard his voice, she heard his name. It's almost like he egged Zach Adams on in the sense that we got to do something here. She knows who I am, and we're in trouble, so we got to get rid of her. That was the insinuation from his testimony.
Without a doubt, Jason Autry should have been charged in this crime. I don't know what conditions that he met with the state or federal prosecutors and what will happen. I think he thinks he's going to get out of jail pretty quick. But even if Zach Adams is convicted in this case, which I think we're a ways away from that right now, Tennessee, while they have the death penalty, hasn't put anybody to death in a very, very, very long time. I don't see them doing it. So in reality, all these guys are looking at life in prison. And this will also impact Dylan Adams. But I thought the grandfather's testimony was very interesting, too, yesterday.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. I have a clip ready, though. If you can, maybe you can stick around a little bit longer. But I'd love to play this clip of Jason Autry basically explaining his motive, saying what he hopes to get out of this. So let's go to that, and then we'll come back, and hopefully you'll stick around. We'll talk about the grandfather's testimony yesterday.
What made you go from telling the world, I didn't have anything to do with it and don't know anything about it, to the things that you have admitted today?
I told the previous attorneys the very first court date when I asked the judge for a session after court, and he allowed us to go back there, I told him that I had information on the case.
You can't say
Did you what?
That I had information
Okay.
Now,
on
you
the
can't
case.
say, you can't say what your lawyer said, but you told them then.
That's correct.
And I don't want to go too deep into what your lawyer, what they said. But after giving those first lawyers the information, was anything set up between yourself or any requests made between yourself and the DAs that were assigned to the case at that time?
There was not.
When you got new lawyers, again, did the situation change?
It did.
Approximately sometime last fall, did the situation change for you?
There did. There was.
And since that time, were you driven from state prison in Nashville to a location under the bridge with your lawyers, both present,
Yes, ma'am.
with Mr. Hagerman,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Ragland, Mr. Christensen, me?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you show all of us in the presence of law enforcement and TDI agents exactly what happened to Holly under the bridge on the 13th?
I did.
Your Honor, I'm going to put something up.
And welcome back to the Law News Network. That is testimony from Jason Autry, and he is the prosecution's main witness. He is somebody that was charged originally, and he struck a deal and testified, basically spilling the beans on everything that happened after Holly Bobo was allegedly raped. He says that he helped Zach Adams dispose of the body and was there when Zach Adams killed Holly Bobo by shooting her. Right now I'm joined by Paul Stanley, and he is a local journalist, and he's on the phone with me. And he's been covering this case from the start. He knows everything about the case. Paul, we were just talking before this about Jason Autry's testimony. Do you think he is the one who really is carrying this largely circumstantial case, that it all rests upon his testimony and whether he's believable?
Amy, I do. You know, in the South, football, college football in particular, is very popular. So I'm going to use the analogy that Jason Autry is the quarterback right now. He's the guy that's in charge of whether the team wins or loses. He's got a supporting cast of players around him, and their weight is going to be very important. But I think when that jury is in the deliberation room, Jason Autry is who they're going to come back to when they make that decision.
Right, and so in that last clip that we just watched, he basically says that he told the judge almost from the beginning that he had information about this case. Our understanding has been that he was denying involvement for years until he finally struck this plea deal and then did a total about-face. He's saying, no, 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 I wanted to cooperate, but nobody set up an appointment between me and the district attorney until I had a change of lawyers, and that's why it took so long. Do you buy that?
So, yes, he was lying about it. I hope he was telling the truth on the stand when he said he was lying about it. But remember, he also lied to Karen Bobo. Karen Bobo called him up, it's my understanding, and said, hey, did you do this? Do you know anything about this? So this is a close-knit community. You know, people know everybody. And I want to go back to one point that Jennifer Thompson, in her opening statement,
the defense attorney, you're saying?
The defense attorney made the statement that Zach Adams does not know, basically has never heard of Holly Bobo. That is not true. It is too tight-knit of a community. He may not have known her well enough to say, hey, Holly, what's up? Her and her.
Well, not only that, Paul, but haven't we heard through testimony that he was actually related to Holly Bobo? That Jason Autry was related to Holly Bobo? There's a relationship seemingly between all of them in the form of cousins.
If we go back to the third and fourth cousin on the family tree, we would find a lot of these people are related. Again, it's just
and that comes from Bobo's side. Bobo's side said there was a relationship.
Exactly. And then you have, we brought up Natalie Bobo, who's the cousin, who had made some comments to Zach about Holly. That was brought up in testimony. So there's a lot of interwoven parts. And Amy, as our viewers know that follow crime cases, there's a lot of testimony we would like to be hearing and seeing, but from a procedural standpoint, from a legal standpoint, it cannot be entered. So the jury cannot hear it and use that as a deciding factor.
Okay, so when you feel that Jason Autry has been caught in lies already, do you think, though, that his testimony in terms of the actual crime and how it unfolded was compelling enough that it can carry this case to a conviction?
that's what 12 people are going to have to decide. My opinion is, if I were on the jury, I would put a lot of emphasis on that. I would go back over and over again, and I would ask myself, is he believable? We all know he's trying to save his own skin. We get that right now. So are a lot of other people. But is he believable? Because if Terry Britt actually did this, or anyone else, why would Jason Autry be going into such detail? How would he know of such detail to be testifying to that? And I think the jurors are going to have to go back to Jason Autry's testimony time and time again before they reach that decision.
But based on your experience and knowledge of this case, is there really any evidence to corroborate what he's saying?
It's
Any
a lot of
direct
hearsay.
evidence, any forensic evidence, anything?
That's the problem. We heard about a reported video that was made of Holly still tied up in the chair that was floating around out there. Obviously, that doesn't exist, or we would be seeing it right now. This case is on a lot of hearsay, and you go back and you look at a Casey Anthony or some others that high-profile cases we've had over the years who have gotten off. I mean, there is still a possibility that Zach Adams walked out of that courtroom and an innocent man, or maybe with a hung jury that's going to have to be rescheduled and prosecution strategy has to change. They are not out of the woods.
Yeah, because if I'm a juror, and we know a lot of jurors are sticklers. If I'm a stickler and I'm looking at this case and I'm looking at the testimony, I'm also going to be saying, okay, maybe it's not enough for me to believe him or not believe him. What can support what he's saying? Give me something that I can use to support his points, rather than just basing it on whether I believe him or not. I mean, if I'm going to follow the instructions of the law, and we know the jurors are going to be instructed to very specific elements that they have to find to achieve a conviction. So how is one person's testimony with nothing to support it going to be enough in this case, as disgusting as some of these people may be? I just don't see how you're going to get a full unanimous conviction.
I will go back, and I can't speak for any member of the jury, obviously, but from a community standpoint, the community is very sympathetic to the Bobo family, to this case. They want justice done. I believe I am accurate when I say that the majority of the community believes Zach was involved and wants a conviction out of this. But in going around town from having coffee with a bunch of men at breakfast, or talking to people like I did last night who were potential jurors and have been following the case, they're asking themselves, is there enough evidence? And you're exactly right. We're basically going to rely, or the 12 jurors are, on Jason Autry. And is that a scary thought? It's a scary thought. I hope he is telling the truth, and I hope what he's saying is right.
How about some of that other shaky evidence, like the footprint that resembled the croc, or I'm trying to think what else. There's really not that much else, right? Is there anything else? I mean, the gun, but do you think the gun? Do you think the gun's convincing at all?
I don't care, just like that. I mean, they were Clint Bobo's croc that they were discussing, and I will go back to this. I think that Clint obviously feels bad, feels horrible about his sister's disappearance and murder. There is more that I believe Clint Bobo has not revealed, or he has revealed it to someone that is not coming out in trial. I would like to know what that is. Who does Clint Bobo think did this? He's the only one who saw it. I think there's just so much more evidence that we have not been able to see as trial observers.
I'm having trouble hearing you, Paul. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay, great. You were talking about Clint Bobo. You were telling me off the air that there's some question over Clint Bobo, whether he was involved or not. What is your take? Do you think that there has been any doubt put in the minds of the jurors that maybe Clint Bobo wasn't investigated thoroughly enough?
My gut feel, Amy, is that Clint was not involved. My gut feel, and based on what I have heard this year, is that Clint has more information, knows more about the players in this alleged crime than he's coming forth with. I mean, obviously, if I were Clint's parents right after this happened, I would have set it down and said, I want you to tell me everything right now. I want to know everything.
But why would he hold back, Paul? What would be his motivation? Why wouldn't he be forthcoming?
Well, again, I think Clint feels horrible about this, but, you know, was Clint involved in any kind of illegal activity that involved drugs? I know they said he told his mom and dad, hey, I've smoked marijuana a few times, but I'm not involved in anything else. But it was Jason, I don't know if it's Jason Autry or someone else, that they believe Zach was coming over to see Clint to teach him how to make meth, and that Holly raised Cain about it, and things went south from there. I just would like to know more about that. I do believe, though, that Zach Adams is on trial here, not Clint Bobo or anyone else. So we've got to focus on Zach Adams, and by bringing up anything about Clint, does that help either really the prosecution or the defense right now? So everybody's just keeping their eye on the task at hand, and that is, I've got to convict Zach Adams or I have to defend him.
But it seems like that's what the defense is doing. They're really trying to use anyone and everyone to distract from the allegations against Zach Adams. And it doesn't seem like Jennifer Thompson has a clear strategy, because every time she is examining somebody on the stand, all she does is bring up a new person, but there's no cohesiveness. There's no theory. It's like, oh, well, Terry Britt could have done it. Oh, well, was Natalie Bobo ever a suspect? How about Clint Bobo? It's like she just wants the jury to look at everybody as a suspect besides the actual defendant.
You know, Amy, in her opening statement, Ms. Thompson, I wish I would have counted the names that she threw out to the jury. It's got to be 20 or 25 names at least. And a attorney friend of mine who is a defense attorney said, I know her strategy. I know what she was trying to do. He said, I don't think she did it very well. But I agree with you. She's just grasping at straws. I don't know if there's a clear strategy. I'm not impressed with her as a defense attorney. I think there are other people sitting at that table that could do a better job. I'm surprised we haven't seen them more on cross-examination.
Yeah, well, your friend said that he knows her strategy. Can you clue me in? Because I can't get a handle on what her strategy is. Is there a strategy?
Confusion.
Is that the strategy, to just confuse everybody? What a great strategy.
Yeah. Hey, there were 30 people involved in this. You know, why is Zach Adams sitting here when a Terry Britt maybe was a larger suspect, when, you know, all these other people. And so if I'm the jury, I mean, I'm sitting there going, whoa, you know, who are all these people? But at the end of the day, they got to make a decision on one person, and it is, if we go back to Jason Autry, they're going to sit in that jury room, and they're going to go back to Jason Autry, I think, when they make that decision.
Yeah, but if her strategy, Paul, is to confuse everybody, it sounds like you're indicating that what her strategy really should have been, if it was organized a little bit better, is to say that the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation bungled the case by not pursuing the proper people. But she's not really solidifying that. She's not clarifying that she's trying to pin it on the disorganization of this investigation. She's just kind of throwing names out there.
Yeah, Steve Parisi, for example, who's an incredible criminal defense attorney in Memphis. I believe he is working on behalf of the Bobo family in this case to kind of monitor the trial and give his thoughts and opinions. But Steve Parisi, Leslie Ballin, they both were Mary Winkler's co-defender. If you defense attorneys, if you remember the case of the lady in Selmer, Tennessee, that shot her Church of Christ pastor husband about 4 or 5 years ago, right down the road. Mm-hmm. She served a little time but got off. Either one of those two people or other people with similar skills in criminal defense in this region, I think, could have dissected the TBI and a Jason Autry and made them look completely irrelevant in this case, and had a stronger defense for Zach Adams.
Yeah, and you said that Zach Adams' grandfather's testimony yesterday was compelling to you. Why is that?
Well, it was not compelling. I think
not compelling.
That the prosecution basically, you know, Mr. Hagerman, I think, crossed him, and I think he discredited Mr. Adams. Look, I feel a great deal of empathy for Mr. Adams. In an earlier interview, Zach Adams' mother made the comment that since the divorce and the passing of Zach's father, that the grandfather, while well-intentioned, simply was just enabling the boys, giving them everything he could, and taking up for them and not providing any oversight or discipline, because those boys stay with him. They live with him a lot. We knew that was the case when the crime was committed. I feel sorry for Mr. Adams, and also his co-worker, the younger gentleman, I think his name was Billy, who came on right after Mr. Adams, basically had to admit, hey, Mr. Adams is forgetting a lot now. Like my mom, he's starting to forget. He was starting to forget in 2011. I think the testimony of Dick Adams, the grandfather, didn't really have any bearing on the case.
And what about Shane Austin? Has there been enough of a deal made about Shane Austin?
There has not been enough of a deal made, but my understanding is, remember, Shane Austin was charged with this crime, confessed to it, gave Zach Adams up, but later committed suicide in a Florida hotel room. And because he is not available for rebuttal or examination, we can't bring his testimony in, or we can't hear it. I think I would love to hear from Shane Austin.
Do you think this case raises questions about the admissibility of evidence and the way that we do things in the court system? And because you've brought up several times that you think that there is critical evidence here that the jury doesn't get to hear. Yet at the same time, a man's life could potentially be hanging in the balance. So do you think that this case is a great example of maybe the fact that maybe we need to re-examine our admissibility rules?
Absolutely. And, those of us who are armchair attorneys who sit back and critique the legal process when we see a trial, we want to hear from Zach Adams. We want to hear from any defendant in a case. I mean, personally, I think if you're accused of murder and you're on trial, then you need to get on the stand to say, yes, I did it, and if I didn't do it, this is where I was, and this is why I didn't do it. But we know in protecting that those of us, or those of the people that are charged, they don't have to get on the stand. But I would love to hear from Zach Adams right now. And the thing that's going through my mind all the time, Amy, is what is Zach thinking? What is he thinking when his grandfather's on the stand? What is he thinking when Jason Autry's on the stand? And I believe we had no less than 4 people yesterday that were quote-unquote friends or relatives of Zach point their finger at him and go, that's Zach Adams. And what is he thinking right now?
Yeah, and I've always been of the perspective that especially in a death penalty trial, it's better in a lot of cases, I don't know about this case, but in most cases, to put the defendant on the stand because it's harder to sentence somebody to death and sometimes even to convict somebody when you can see their facial expressions, when you can hear their emotions. It humanizes them and it makes it more difficult to come to that conclusion.
Right, and some of the friends of mine who were potential jurors who would call through the process, Mr. Zach Adams was in the room when all these jurors were being questioned, and a handful of them, mostly female, said, wow, I think he was staring right through me. It was a very creepy feeling. Now, that was just their opinion going through that, but I understand. If you remember Jason Autry the other day, he basically said that there was homosexual incest because he said Dylan was involved in getting them prepared to rape Bobo, if you remember that testimony.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing people said, they could see Zach almost want to come out of his chair. He flinched like he was like, how can you say that? Or I dare you say that? That's the only emotion I've seen from him through this entire trial.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that putting Zach Adams on the stand wouldn't be such a bad idea because the person that he's essentially going head-to-head with is Jason Autry. I mean, how can you get any worse than Jason Autry in terms of putting a person up there that people just find repulsive? I mean, and I'm backing that statement up with the fact that he called the victim an effing, I won't even say the word. It starts with a B. But yeah. He was so disrespectful to this poor victim. I don't care if you were involved or not. Admittedly, he was involved in her final moments and may have even egged those on. And I just want to play a clip really quick to support that, actually, if you'll stick around for just a few more minutes. I think the trial's about to get underway, but I want to play a clip of Jason Autry talking about Holly Bobo's final moments and him playing a role in her death.
What do you mean by small amount?
The bed of the truck was ridged, like the bed of the truck, and it looked as if it had just lightly skidded over. And the blanket at the upper end of the torso that I grabbed had a small blood spot, maybe the size of an orange.
Hands up, because I don't think they can see on here.
Maybe the size of an orange.
Did you look inside the blanket?
Never,
Did you unwrap?
never.
How were you able to swing her body around and you get the top part and Zachary Adams gets the bottom part without unwrapping the blanket?
I grabbed the blanket just like you would this shirt right here. The body didn't weigh very much. I was in pretty good shape. I'm a pretty good sized guy. I grabbed the blanket just like that right there and walked to the tailgate of the truck. At that time, he grabs the legs. We set the body down with the upper torso on that pile of riprap that y'all just showed, that we just discussed.
After you put Holly's body down on the riprap, what happened?
Mr. Adams goes to the driver's side of the pickup. I'm standing over the top of him with my hands upon my knees. She being right here. And at that time, I see the foot move, a movement, and a sound of distress that sound like come out of her voice, come from the blanket. At that time, I walked to the door, to the passenger side door of the pickup, and Mr. Adams was digging in a fanny pack. I told him, I said, this fucking bitch is still alive. We just stopped for a second. I walked.
And so that's testimony from Jason Autry talking about Holly Bobo's final moments, saying that he was there with Zach Adams when Zach Adams killed Holly Bobo, and he was testifying for the prosecution after striking a deal. We're expecting the trial, day 9, to get underway very shortly. The judge is with the attorneys right now, finalizing a charge sheet. But in the meantime, I'm joined by Paul Stanley, a local journalist who has been following this case from the very beginning. And Paul, Jason was just talking about Holly Bobo's final moments. What do you make of the fact that he's admitting here that he was involved, but he's saying that he was only involved after he came upon Holly Bobo wrapped in the blanket with Zach Adams? So he's removing himself from this alleged scenario where prosecutors say she was raped beforehand.
Exactly. What I haven't seen thus far, Amy, is any evidence of the rape. You know, we heard the Tennessee State Trooper testify when he went to visit Zach. He saw what he thought was a very good, maybe new type mattress laying up against the wall, and was suspicious of that. Again, I have never heard testimony that mattress was examined or looked at. And you've got Jason Autry painting this very vivid picture that he's painting on a canvas of what happened. If he did not do that, if Zach Adams did not do that, then Jason Autry is completely lying. So if we're separating the Adams from a Jerry Britt or somebody else, we're talking about two totally different scenarios. And it's just amazing to me. If I were Zach Adams and I were completely innocent of this crime, I would be trying to come out of my chair to be able to get on that witness stand and tell you I did not do this.
Yeah.
And I wish we could see that.
Well, it seems like that's really all the defense would need. I mean, I understand that they're trying to bring these other law enforcement agents up on the stand and have done so to point the finger at other people and to sort of indirectly accuse the Tennessee Bureau of Investigations of botching this whole crime scene processing and things like that. But it seems like if the prosecution's main witness is somebody who struck a deal, who is admittedly a meth addict, who says that he was there at the point that Zach Adams shot Holly Bobo, why not contest that with a very similar figure who can just basically say that whole story isn't true. I mean, it seems like that would be the key thing. And then you're putting the jury in the position of deciding which drug addict they believe more.
Amy, you bring up a great point, because we can sit here and debate the believability of Jason Autry right now. What we have not seen in this trial is anyone counter Jason Autry's testimony. Who has said that Jason Autry is an outright liar to the facts that he's testified? No one that I've seen.
And Zach Adams may be more passionate because he's fighting for his life, and Jason Autry has struck a deal.
That's exactly right. And we've got a lot of shady characters in here. I mean, it's really hard to make this up. But to me, it's either the Adams clan that were involved in Holly's disappearance and murder, or they didn't have anything to do with it. Because Terry Britt was not, he was never connected to the Adams crime. I mean, it's not that he was engaged with them or he was around or whatever. Terry Britt was over here, the Adams were over here, so it's one or the other, or maybe someone else that we don't know of. But this is Zach Adams' life, and this today is about Zach Adams, or the next few days will be. And if I were him and I were innocent, I would want to tell the world.
Yeah, and it's not even like he has to go into much detail. All he really has to do is say that everything that Jason Autry said is a lie. But it's interesting that you brought up the point that there's really no evidence of the rape, which is also part of the prosecution's theory, because if he were to be convicted, when you get to the death penalty phase, there would need to be an aggravating factor to prove that the crime was cruel, atrocious, and heinous. And so the rape is a big part of that. So I just don't see how they can even get to a death penalty finding here, a positive death penalty finding, without any type of evidence to corroborate that aggravating factor.
The pink underwear that was found on the side of the road, now if that had the DNA of Zach Adams or anyone else, hey, that's something that's a huge piece of evidence. But again, we don't have that. We don't have clothing items. We certainly can't examine the body because it's not there. But it's a very heinous crime that the jury's being tasked to levy a large penalty against someone that is basically it's hearsay, circumstantial evidence, and which of the bad guys do you believe the most?
Right. I mean, there were some allegations from Dicus and some other people. There were rumors that maybe the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation had an opportunity to more thoroughly investigate Zach Adams and some of these other associates of his, and they did not effectively act upon that during the time when they were looking for Holly Bobo and when they had just found Holly Bobo. Do you think that this would have been a totally different case if either they had pursued those suspects from the beginning more thoroughly or been able to locate Holly Bobo's remains sooner than 2.5 years after the fact?
Oh, absolutely. Anything they could have gotten would have helped the case one way or the other, either prove Zach Adams' guilt or evidence toward that, or convince them that he should be exonerated and never charged. Gosh, there's a ton of circumstantial evidence. If it's based on circumstantial evidence, I would lean toward conviction. If you're going to have to base it on reasonable doubt of what you heard in the courtroom, this is going to be a toss-up.
Yeah. And so what are you expecting today? Because the trial is about to get underway. Who do you think is going to take the stand, and what do you think that the defense needs to do here to round out their case and finish strong?
Gosh, to finish strong, you've got to add a lot of confusion. If they just call people like they did yesterday to say, well, he didn't do it, still point the finger at Terry Britt, I'm not so sure that that's a great defensive strategy right now. Again, we would love to hear from Zach Adams. That would be the incredible bombshell if he were to take the stand. But let's just say that the last defense witnesses are uneventful today, and now we go into closing statements, closing argument. Now the jury almost has to weigh everything on which side gives the best argument and the best case for saying either guilt or innocence. And again, that puts a lot of pressure on both the defense and the prosecution and the jury.
Yeah, and we're going to head to the courtroom in just a few seconds. I can see that another law enforcement official is on the stand. John Walker from the U.S. Marshal. It seems like the defense has all of the people, like I said, that the prosecution would want on the stand. Are you expecting the prosecution to really cross-examine these people hard because they are law enforcement? And it does not look good to have all these law enforcement testifying for the defense.
Oh, yes. I expected that yesterday. I thought they were going to come down a little harder on Terry Dykes than they did. I think that you'll see maybe a Paul Hagerman, who's he's very low-key but very forthright in his examination questions. Go after some of these law enforcement guys. Hey, look, they have to discredit them. I mean, if you do not discredit the law enforcement officials caused by the defense, then that only strengthens the defense.
Great. Well, Paul, thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate it. Your knowledge is so thorough. You are truly an expert on this case. And we're going to go straight to the courtroom now and see how the defense and the prosecution handles this U.S. Marshal on the stand in the Holly Bobo case.